Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos and welcome to This Week in Mythic Plus. This week's affixes are Fortified, Necrotic, and also we've got Sanguine thrown in the mix. This is going to be tricky. The Fortified Necrotic combination is a pretty tough one to deal with in a lot of trash pulls. A lot of pressure on the tank there. And then Sanguine is going to come in and add even more kind of technical pressure on the tank. The good news is that the way that you want to play around the affixes sort of lines up nicely. So you're going to want to make sure that mobs are being moved as the pull is ending, but you're probably doing that anyways because you're probably kiting as the pull is ending because that's when Necrotic, you have the most stacks of it, right? So that's when you're in the most danger. So ideally, the tank is playing against those two affixes the same way, but both the tank and the whole group really needs to be aware that both of those are there. Particularly using stuff like knockback effects or AoE stuns towards the end of a pull. It can be really good, but you have to be really careful with how it's done, right? You can't be thinking about just one of the two affixes. You really have to be thinking about both Necrotic and Sanguine, because if you use an AoE stun while the mobs are still grouped, you'll cause Sanguine healing, right? Even if you're trying to protect your tank from getting stacks. And similarly, if you try to knock mobs such that they don't cause a bunch of Sanguine, you might refresh your tank's Necrotic stacks. So really, you got to be thinking about both, right? A good knock is still fantastic. It's really good. If you do a sideways knock, the mobs are running in a nice line, stuff is starting to die, but they're getting pretty close to your tank. You can kind of knock them sideways and accomplish both, right? You can help protect your tank and avoid Sanguine healing, but that is tough. Really good, though, if you can find a way to do it. Also, just in general, anything you can do to help provide some assistance for your tank. The way that I would recommend doing it this week with like AoE stuns is AoE stuns at 40% health on the trash pack as your tank is looking to start getting out and start running, but before stuff is actually dying, so that the Sanguine isn't a problem there. And then, save knockback effects for kind of sideways knocks as stuff is dying. Okay, let's go dungeon by dungeon and talk about some stuff. First off, I want to talk a little bit about skipping tormented mobs, because I've started hearing people complain about this happening in their pugs. There's a reason that none of my routes have ever suggested, which you can pick up these routes in the description below. If you're interested, they're over on Raider.io every week. There's one with skips and one without. And whether or not you're reading a route with skips or without skips from me, I'm never going to suggest skipping a tormented mob and doing the last boss with the aura. It is very much doable. It's the kind of thing that will save you a little bit of time, and particularly the two tormented mobs that give the weakest powers are also two that are pretty manageable auras on the last boss. So that's Oros Coldheart and Sagadon the Breaker. And those two, Sagadon is just extra tank damage on almost all the end bosses, and Oros is the movement speed slow, which is annoying, but not unmanageable. And so on the last boss, those are definitely possible. It's usually possible to fight one in most keys with the last boss, but it's still tough, right? It adds an extra level of difficulty, and there's a very good chance if you're trying to pull this off in a pug that somebody in the group just is not used to doing the boss at all and just not ready to be slowed by 50% on the boss, for instance. So I would say in 99% of cases, if you're doing like a weekly key, you're going to run a higher risk of depleting the key rather than a lower risk by doing something like that. So be careful with that. However, if you want to, usually the ones you're going to want to consider are Oros and or Sagadon, and basically never Incinerator or Executioner, because those have tougher auras and they give the damage powers, right? These are the ones that give Champion's Brand. Both can offer Champion's Brand, and Varuth also offers Dagger of Necrotic Wounding and the Volcanic Plumage one. So very much ones that you don't want to skip for the last boss. Okay, so talking about the dungeons in particular, we got Sanguine and Necrotic to worry about, Sanguine Fortified Necrotic to worry about in this dungeon. So that means you got to be careful with the stacks in this area. You also have to be really careful with Sanguine with the urns. So if you're using urns for stun in this dungeon, make sure that stuff is not dying while everything is still stunned, unless you have something like a Ring of Peace to knock them all out of the first few Sanguine puddles. Hals of Atonement This is a dungeon where the Sanguine, so the annoying part about Sanguine is going to be if you get Sanguine underneath a Houndmaster, because they just stand still and archer at you. So watch out for that. You will cause Sanguine when you kill Toiling Groundskeepers, if that's part of your plan, so do watch out for that as well. Mist of Tyrannus Scythe. So Mists is a dungeon where I offer a route with skips that offers this. It has this skip at the start of the dungeon. This has become a very popular strategy among higher end key groups, and it's good enough in terms of time save that I think it is worth having a route here. But I want to reiterate that like this is probably the highest fail rate skip in any of my routes, because you need to avoid both of these True Sight mobs. So you basically just follow this line, right? You kind of hook a wide angle around this first one and then cut equally between the two. You have about, I don't know, 5 or 10 yards of wiggle room of like width of the safe path here. So it's not impossible. It's not like a really hard line to walk, but it is something that if you try and just do this in a group without making sure that everybody knows it's going to happen, you're going to wipe because somebody isn't going to remember that these things have True Sights or even know that, and they're just going to pop their invis pot, run straight forward, and pull this thing. So if you use this route, it is a time save, definitely, but be careful of that. Plaguefall. Plaguefall is a dungeon where I would probably suggest the least to skip one of these, to skip a tormented mob. You can skip Sagadon, so Sagadon is over here, and you can skip it, but I really would not recommend this. Like the last boss, that's going to turn all of the little ads into one-shots on anybody if the tank doesn't have immediate threat on them, and definitely the slow aura on the last boss is really, really tough in here as well. So of all the dungeons, I would say this is one that I'd be the most tentative about skipping a tormented mob in. Also remember that you can grab Incinerator before Dr. Ickis. That's definitely worth doing because these powers are nice to get for that boss. So I would do that. I would sneak ahead, grab this power, and then come back and finish off the rest of the dungeon. Alright, Sanguine Depths. Very annoying with Sanguine active. That is something that you will quickly find as this dungeon. Actually, this week we've got the 2 dungeon name affixes, right? We've got Sanguine Depths and we've got Necrotic Wake. So both of the affixes that are in our dungeons this expansion are active. Yeah, Sanguine Depths, big pain with Sanguine Necrotic. Just the trash packs require a lot of control and use of crowd control effects, use of slows, use of the space that you have available to you, especially if you are going to do stuff like invis pot skips, right? And you're going to leave these kind of empty spaces behind you that are full of packs still that you can't backtrack into. You have to just be really careful and really economical with the space you have. So, good luck. All right, Spires of Ascension. Spires of Ascension, not too bad with these affixes. Like Sanguine is a pain with a lot of the stuff here, but Necrotic isn't too bad. Sanguine is a real pain with the Forsworn Goliaths. You really got to make sure you don't drop a puddle underneath these things because they're CC immune and they love to cast. Similarly, in a lot of these other packs, you'll have stuff that stands still and casts and does not move unless you interrupt it or use a grip or something on it. So that is the big thing to watch out for. But luckily, there's not really too many pulls with a lot of mobs that quickly stack up damage on your tank. So the Necrotic affix I usually find to not be as bad here. It's really going to be mostly about Sanguine. I said at the start of the section, not too bad. It really is quite bad. Probably the worst Sanguine dungeon in terms of just like, if you're not ready for it, man, it's really bad. You'll full heal a Goliath and feel really bad about yourself. Necrotic Wake, definitely not too bad. Definitely one where Sanguine, not the end of the world. You can even use it to heal up a Corpse Harvester, or it's not the Corpse, it's a Flesh Crafter. Yeah, the Flesh Crafter, if you want to keep one around to throw Cleavers for a while, can be useful to prevent your DPS from accidentally killing one that you don't want to be killed just yet. So be on the lookout for that strategy if it's something that you're interested in. And yeah, overall, I think this is one of the better dungeons for this week. And then finally, Theater of Pain. Theater of Pain does have a couple of annoying Sanguine bits, but as long as you are careful with where you're fighting stuff, I usually find this one to not be too bad. I don't know, I've had a couple different experiences with different kinds of tanks in here. Like, depending on how you manage this Gore Chop wing, it can be a lot easier or harder. Like this first pull in particular, the way you want to make sure you do this is just have the entire group all stacked up at the start. Because if you come into this pull, right, and you've got, let's see how I can draw this out. If you come into this pull and you've got like one person here, one person here, one person here, you know, in the melee or like here or something like that, right? You're going to have these mobs just jumping all over the place and getting damage down unevenly. And then they are going to run back through Sanguine puddles from whatever stuff is dying here. So you really want to keep the entire group nice and in a tight, you know, tight stack, and then kind of move together in the same direction away from all the puddles that you've been making. So that's an important little bit for this area. By far the most dangerous stuff is the sludge spewers. You're going to really want to make sure you interrupt them. And the big guys are a lot less scary than they look, even though they look scary. It's really the sludge spewers that are going to get you in this place. So watch out for them. Anyways, that's a look at the dungeons this week. Good luck out there in your keys. It is not it's not the worst Fortified week on the calendar, but definitely this season, Fortified weeks usually, most of them have something icky going on them. So you're going to have to get your Fortified score on some, unless you save it for like, you know, Raging Explosive, or I guess Bursting Storming Fortified. That's going to be one of our premier Fortified weeks. So maybe wait till then if you really want some Fortified score. This week's probably a little tougher than then. Anyways, hope you liked the video. Hope it helped. Remember to hit subscribe and stuff. Ring that wacky bell. And thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.